The line went silent when I said one of the mall stores had just installed cameras and they'd hand the footage to police the moment I filed a report. For a breath or two, I heard nothing but her guilt trying to breathe through a covered receiver. I didn't save her from the silence. People explain themselves to echoes. I wasn't supposed to be a detective. I was young, married, and pregnant. 3 facts that parked me on a different island than most people my age. My husband had a stable job and family money, so our house looked like grown-ups lived there. I still apologized for it sometimes, like nice furniture was a character flaw. I tried to keep friends my age, even younger, because I wanted easy conversations about nothing. That turned out to be the worst idea I'd had in a long time. One girl from my old school, a freshman when I was a junior, started dropping by. She was fun and loud in a way that made a quiet house feel like the windows were open. One night she asked to bring a friend for dinner. I cooked. They laughed. My husband played polite host. At some point, the guest excused herself to use the restroom, and we waved her down the hall. She went the other way. She returned with an empty smile and a compliment about the food. They stayed, they left, the evening folded up neatly behind them, except for a bubble of cold air under my ribs that didn't pop. A week later, I reached for my wedding earrings, pearls ringed with tiny diamonds, part of a set my husband gave me the night before our vows. They always live in a little dish on my dresser. The dish was there. The earrings were not. We pulled the room apart. Pillows, drawers, the small jewelry box I barely touch because everything in it still feels like it belongs to someone older than me. Nothing. My husband told me I must have misplaced them and we'd find them eventually. I nodded because people want to be believed when they're comforting you. I did not believe a word. Weeks went by and a different siren went off. A checking account we barely used, a holdover from my husband's abandoned side hustle idea, was suddenly in the red by nearly $1,000. Not one big hit, but a constellation of small ones. Fast fashion, food court, makeup, teen stores, all clustered at the same mall. After they burned through the little buffer we kept there, the overdraft fees multiplied like fruit flies in a heat wave. I called my husband. He hadn't touched that card. Neither had I. The card lived in our bedroom. A plain equation walked itself onto the chalkboard in my head. My earrings were missing. A debit card had learned to walk. Only a few people had been in our home lately. One of them had taken a wrong turn away from the bathroom. I started calling the stores. Most didn't have cameras. One had just installed them after a run of shoplifting. They couldn't give footage to me, but they'd share it with police if I filed a report. I thanked the manager and sat very still, watching my pulse try to climb out of my throat. Then I called the bank. What would it take to declare the charges fraudulent and reverse the fees? There was a window, they said, and it was closing. If I didn't act by then, the charges would belong to us forever. The overdrafts would stick unless I filed fraud. Their timeline and the store's cameras slid together like teeth on a gear. Where we live, $2,000 is a line the law notices. Below it, you get scolded by the universe. Above it, you get a record. My earrings were worth roughly $800. The spree plus fees hovered around $1,000. I didn't need rage. I needed gravity. I needed the kind of math that makes people return what they took and beg the calculator for mercy. I called my friend with a voice so calm it sounded borrowed. I told her the bad news. Someone who'd been in my house had stolen my wedding earrings and a debit card from our bedroom, then gone shopping at the mall like it was a game show. She said all the correct, sympathetic words. I mentioned the amount, the overdraft fees, and that we were past the number the law treats as a felony. She jumped in, too fast, to point out that the stores I named didn't have cameras, so how could anyone prove who used the card? It was like watching a fish leap into a boat. I let her finish and then added, gently, that one store had just installed cameras and was ready to hand footage to the police the moment I filed. Silence expanded until it had edges. Then, could she come over? She arrived within 30 minutes carrying my pearl earrings, the missing debit card, and, like a magic trick, the small diamond ring I'd inherited from my great-aunt, a ring I hadn't even realized was missing because I almost never wore it. She set them on the table the way people put offerings on altars they don't believe in. Her story arrived pre-ironed. She hadn't stolen anything. Her friend had slipped upstairs under the pretense of using the bathroom. She only found out later. She didn't want to betray anyone. Tears arrived on cue. Under light pressure, the truth rattled loose. There were 4 of them. 2 were 17, 2 18. All of them had used the card. My former friend had tapped her share at the register and wanted partial credit now for not being the one to lift it from my dresser. I didn't raise my voice. I said exactly what would happen next. I'd be filing a police report unless I had every name and every parent's phone number today. The value of the jewelry plus the spree and fees put us over the line the court system cares about. What happened after this call, I told her, depended entirely on how fast she wrote. The next weeks tasted like iron. I called each parent with the same calm script: what was taken, the dollar amount, the bank's fees, the camera, the law's bright line, and the deadline. They didn't argue. They asked what it would take to keep their kids out of a courtroom. I told them, plainly, full repayment in writing by a date that left me time to file if they failed. The work began. Late shifts, weekend shifts, the kind of jobs that leave grease under your nails and humility in your backpack. Envelopes arrived with careful handwriting and exact numbers. My former friend called once to say the total seemed unfair, that the fees weren't really spending. I explained, slowly, how overdrafts reproduce and how the bank would only reverse them if I declared fraud, which I wouldn't, because I wasn't going to carry risk for people who'd used my card like a toy. She asked for more time. I asked why I should trust her. The conversation ended itself. In the end, I got everything back: the pearls, the ring, every dollar of the spree, every cent of the fees. I didn't file the report. I didn't keep their numbers. When I think about it now, the part that feels like mercy isn't that I spared them. It's that I let them pay the full sticker price of their choices. Money leaves a better scar than a record. Here's the small, hard truth I learned. Generosity without boundaries is a vending machine for thieves. Lock your bedroom, lock your accounts. And if you invite laughter into your home, don't confuse it with loyalty. That sound on the line, the long, guilty silence when someone meets their own reflection, will teach you more than any apology. Moral compass. Sometimes justice is a quiet ledger, not a loud courtroom. Payback doesn't need an audience. It needs a balance sheet and a deadline. Would you have filed the report anyway, or let the debt teach the lesson? "If you want perfection, buy a house," my landlord said after the 3rd text about no heat and black mold. He liked to say the quiet part out loud. The unit was as is, the rent was market, and my standards were dramatic. Meanwhile, the ceiling wept when it rained, the outlet in the bedroom hummed like a bee, and the furnace only pretended to work when it heard company. I started a log the night the smoke alarm chirped without smoke. Date, time, issue, photo. Drips became timestamps. The thermostat became a punchline. When I mentioned the toddler upstairs and the smell coming from the closet, the landlord replied with a thumbs-up emoji and a reminder that late fees were strictly enforced. The lease had a repair clause written like a dare. Tenant notifies, landlord responds within a reasonable time. Reasonable in his dictionary meant never. He'd bragged about cash flowing with minimal effort. I decided to calculate what minimal effort cost when the effort is unlawful. I wasn't angry yet. Anger is loud and short. I needed something long and quiet. Paper, statutes, and the kind of daylight that inspectors bring in with clipboards. The city website reads like a bedtime story if you're tired of being dismissed. I learned the numbers first. Section this, subsection that, minimum heat, safe wiring, habitable premises. Then the tools, certified mail for a paper trail, a 14-day cure notice, photos with date stamps, and an escrow account so rent had somewhere honest to live while repairs didn't. I documented everything like a junior auditor. Water stains measured with a tape, a carbon monoxide reading from a hardware store meter, a $9 hygrometer tacked to the wall, its needle climbing every time the closet door opened. I spoke to an older neighbor who had her own log, 3 years of temporary fixes, and a broken promise about a roof that was on the schedule. I sent the first letter by certified mail with a calm paragraph of facts and a list of code sections. I gave a deadline and the name of the licensed contractors I'd already called for quotes, in case he wanted to skip the part where he Googled. At the bottom, I included one short line. Rent will be paid into escrow until the violations are corrected and inspected. The bank clerk didn't blink when I opened the account. Code enforcement didn't blink when I filed the complaint. The only person blinking was my landlord, who suddenly discovered the caps lock key and a fresh interest in the definition of retaliation. Inspections arrived like weather. 2 city employees, 1 clipboard each, and a tape that didn't care how friendly anyone smiled. They wrote quietly. They photographed louder than my texts ever sounded. When they were done, a yellow sheet bloomed on the door. Violations posted. Minimum heat not maintained. Active leak. Suspected mold. Ungrounded outlets. Re-inspection scheduled. Fines accrue daily after a deadline. That sentence changes posture. My landlord tried a classic move, a notice to quit citing lease breaches that didn't exist. Retaliatory eviction is ugly and illegal, and the city keeps a pamphlet handy that says so in bullet points even he could understand. I answered once, in writing. I itemized his timeline next to mine, the ignored texts, the certified letters, the escrow receipts, the inspection results. I attached a draft small claims complaint listing rent abatement, out-of-pocket costs, and statutory damages, plus a copy to the HOA manager who'd already asked why contractors never produced insurance certificates. The HOA has rules too. They like them enforced. He hired a handyman. The handyman took one look at the wiring and called a licensed electrician who refused to sign off without permits. Permits meant another inspection, which meant more daylight, which meant the leak that birthed the mold couldn't just be painted beige and renamed normal humidity. The clock didn't stop. Neither did the fines. Repairs finally arrived with permits attached. They were loud, competent, and too late to keep me. We negotiated like adults who had read the same code book. Release from lease without penalty, full deposit returned, 1 month of abatement for the time the unit was inhabitable, and written confirmation that the notice to quit was void and withdrawn. I moved out with my boxes and my logs, leaving the keys on top like a period at the end of a long sentence. I didn't need to win an argument. I needed a habitable home and a record that told the truth. The record did its job. The fines taught the rest. My landlord stopped talking about cash flow when the city billed the days. Here's the part that might matter more than the mold. Boundaries written in law work better than boundaries written in texts. You don't have to be loud to be heard. You have to be documented. If someone profits by cutting corners, make the corners expensive. Moral compass isn't justice in housing, it's procedural and patient, and it belongs to anyone who does the homework. Would you have stayed and fought longer or taken the clean exit as soon as the leverage worked? My boss loved public reminders that he was in charge. Praise was private, criticism was a team-building exercise. He canceled our off-site the morning of, took credit for deliverables he hadn't opened, and once introduced me to a senior director as the spreadsheet guy, which was interesting because I wrote the roadmap he was presenting. None of this made me special. Everyone on the team had a version of the same story, told in the tone people use when they know the punchline won't change their paycheck. Morale was a word we passed around like a cough drop. HR had a recognition budget, tiny but real, that he preferred to hold for Q4 optics. It was July. I kept notes. Not a burn book, just dates, meetings, and the difference between what he promised and what the calendar remembers. When a new VP scheduled a site visit and asked managers to showcase teen culture, my boss volunteered a slide about how he fosters connection and celebrates wins. His slide had stock photos of people with perfect teeth. We had takeout boxes and a backlog. The VP's admin sent the logistics, rooms, times, the part where each group could host a short meet and greet. My boss forwarded the email with a single line, "Will pass sprint week." He copied the VP, as if to show how serious we are about business. He expected us to nod. I nodded in a way that means no. Policy allows any employee to use the recognition budget with the manager's approval, or, if the manager is unavailable, a skip-level approver. My boss was many things. Available wasn't one of them. He'd booked himself remote focus time the entire afternoon of the visit. The skip level was a director who answers emails like they're yes-no polls. I drafted one message. For VP visit, request to use recognition line for a 30-minute team meet and greet. Pre-approved vendor, under limit, no alcohol. Calendar hold attached. I attached a menu from the vendor our legal team had already blessed. I added a short agenda, introductions, demo table, shoutouts for the last sprint, and a photo wall with printed thank you notes. The director replied in under 5 minutes. Approved. Add me as optional. I booked a room near the VP's path, placed the order, and filed the expense to the correct cost center with the word recognition in the subject line where finance likes to see it. Then I posted a single message in the team channel with the calendar invite. Meet and greet during VP visit. Recognition treats. Bring a demo, bring a story. No exclamation points, no revolt. Just a plan. Lastly, I asked facilities for 2 stands, one for a monitor looping our before-after metrics, one for our thank you wall. I printed the notes at the copy center, small cards with typed sentences from one teammate to another. None mentioned our boss. All mentioned work he didn't do but was happy to review. My boss learned about the meet and greet the way he learns most things, from an email chain that didn't start with him. The VP's assistant thanked us for hosting, attached the photos, and CC'd my boss with the director and HR. The phrase "great use of recognition" line did most of the lifting. He called me in for a talk about process. I brought the receipts, the approval email, the expense filed to the correct cost center, and the calendar invite that had him set to busy remote focus. I said we didn't host a party, we hosted work with snacks. He said we should align in the future. I said I had aligned with policy. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't have a slide for this moment. What changed wasn't the org chart, it was gravity. Requests landed differently. The director pinged me directly for follow-ups from the VP's notes. 2 teammates got put forward for a quarterly award. My boss started arriving to meetings 2 minutes early and asking open questions that sounded suspiciously like listening. Credit travels up when the hallway photos do. I didn't run a war, I just stopped letting our wins be invisible. Sometimes the smallest revenge is letting the right people see who does the work when the door across the hall is heads down. Policies are not walls, they're doors with hinges. Use the hinge. Moral compass: if a manager hoards recognition, give it away in daylight and let the calendar tell the truth. Would you have looped him in and risked the cancel, or done exactly what we did? Show the work and let the receipts speak. The VP stopped at our table because it looked like something was happening. People happening. Laptops open, screensavers off, the good kind of noise. We had a small stack of pastries and fruit, bottled water with our company's logo, and the loop of metrics playing like a heartbeat. I welcomed her, introduced the team by the projects they owned, and stepped aside. She asked questions the way leaders do when they remember what doing felt like. The demo story about shaving load times by 28% landed first. The accessibility redesign landed second. The product manager talked about shipping on time through a supplier miss. None of these sentences needed my boss. He was, by his calendar, remote and heads down. Halfway through, the director who'd approved the order walked in, picked up a cup, and said, "The 6 words that change how rooms behave. This is exactly what I hoped for." People smiled the way people do when someone recognizes the obvious. We took 2 quick photos in front of the thank you wall. The VP asked me to send her copies. She asked who organized. I said, "We used the recognition budget." She nodded like that sentence had oxygen in it. Across the hall, my boss's door stayed closed. The calendar showed his status as busy. I didn't knock. The agenda didn't require it. The room emptied when the time block ended and the VP moved on. We wiped the table, packed the extras into the break room, and went back to sprint work without changing our Slack icons to party hats.